The UES Dauntless cut through the emptiness of space, its engines humming softly as it patrolled the outer territories of human-controlled space. The massive warship, pride of Earth's defense fleet, carried the most advanced weapons systems humanity had ever developed. Its sleek hull gleamed under the distant starlight, reinforced armor plating designed to withstand tremendous punishment. On the bridge, Captain Hannah Park stood with perfect posture, her experienced eyes scanning the holographic displays floating before her. 20 years in the Space Defense Force had earned her command of the most prestigious vessel in the fleet, though she never expected to find herself quite this far from home. "Sensor sweep complete, Captain," reported Lieutenant Jun Kim from the tactical station. "All sectors clear." Captain Park nodded, but something felt wrong. A sensation she'd learned to trust over her long career. Run another sweep, different frequencies this time. Something's out there. The bridge crew exchanged glances, but knew better than to question the captain's instincts. Her intuition had saved them more than once. Dr. Sukli, the ship's chief engineer, entered the bridge and moved to stand beside the captain. "Engine efficiency is at optimal levels, Captain. Whatever that interference was in the quantum drive, it seems to have resolved itself." Captain Park was about to respond when Lieutenant Kim called out, "Captain, I'm picking up unusual energy readings at coordinates 227 by 143. "On screen," Park ordered, her voice calm despite the sudden tension in her shoulders. The main view screen shifted to show empty space, but the sensor readings told a different story. Strange energy patterns pulsed across the display, unlike anything in their database. "What do you make of these readings?" she asked, turning to her tactical officer. Lieutenant Kim's fingers danced across his console, running the signatures through the ship's vast identification protocols. "Nothing I've seen before, Captain. The pattern doesn't match any known signature, human or alien." Dr. Lee moved closer to the screen, her forehead creased with concern. "Those energy ripples, they're similar to quantum distortions, but with a harmonic pattern I've never encountered. Almost like they're artificial." "Artificial?" Park echoed. "You think someone's generating these?" Before Dr. Lee could answer, Ensign Min at Communications straightened in her chair. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange. It's like background noise, but with a pattern. Almost like." The ship suddenly lurched violently to port. Warning klaxons blared as the lighting flickered and emergency systems engage. "Report," Park shouted, grabbing her command chair to steady herself. "Impact on the starboard hull." Lieutenant Kim called out, his fingers flying across his console. "Shields holding at 87%. "Where did it come from?" Park demanded. "I want visual." "Working on it," Kim responded, his voice tight with concentration. "There's nothing on sensors, but wait." The view screen flickered and then revealed their attackers as some kind of stealth technology failed or was voluntarily dropped. What appeared were ships unlike any they had encountered before. Sleek, predatory vessels with biomechanical features that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. 7 vessels, Kim announced, his voice steady despite the implications. Configuration unknown. Definitely not human design. Captain Park's mind raced through first contact protocols, but before she could issue orders, another blast rocked the ship. "They're firing again," Kim shouted. "Energy weapons of some kind, but the signatures are strange. Not designed to penetrate our hull, but rather tow." Multiple system failures reported throughout the ship, called out Lieutenant Yoon from operations. Engineering reports power fluctuations in the main reactor. The ship shuddered again as more blasts connected with the hull. "Shields down to 62%, Kim reported. "They're targeting our power distribution nodes specifically." Park's eyes narrowed. "They're not trying to destroy us," she realized, her knuckles white, as she gripped her chair. "They're trying to cripple us." "Captain," Kim called out, voice tight with urgency, "I'm getting a transmission from the lead vessel. Audio only." Park nodded. "Let's hear it." A harsh, mechanical voice filled the bridge, speaking perfectly understandable English despite its alien origin. "Attention, human vessel. This is Commander Krell of the Vex Imperium. Your species has been evaluated and found wanting. Your technology will be cataloged and your resources assimilated. Resistance is unnecessary and inefficient." Park's jaw tightened. "Open a channel," she ordered. When Lieutenant Min nodded, Park spoke firmly. "This is Captain Hannah Park of the United Earth Ship Dauntless. Your unprovoked attack constitutes an act of war against humanity. Stand down immediately, and we can discuss this peacefully." A sound came through the speakers that might have been laughter. "Peace is inefficient, Captain Park. The strong survive, the weak are harvested. It is the way of the universe." The transmission cut off abruptly as another barrage hit the Dauntless, this one more powerful than before. "Battle stations," Park ordered. "Charge main weapons and prepare to return fire." The crew rushed to comply, but Lieutenant Yoon shook her head. "Weapon systems are not responding, Captain. Whatever they're hitting us with is disrupting our power grid." "Engineering to bridge." Dr. Lee's voice came through the comm system, now interspersed with static. "Captain, they're using some kind of focused EMP technology, but it's like nothing I've seen before. It's not just shutting down our systems, it's rewriting them somehow. Can you counter it?" Park asked. "Working on it," Lee replied, "but we need time." Another blast hit, more powerful than the others. Consoles exploded across the bridge, sending crew members flying. Emergency lighting kicked in as the main power failed. "Hull breach on decks 4 through 7. Someone shouted through the smoke filling the bridge. "Emergency bulkheads engage." Captain Park struggled to her feet, blood running from a cut on her forehead. "Lieutenant Kim." Status of the enemy vessels. Kim, still at his partially functioning station, looked up with wide eyes. They're just sitting there, Captain, watching us." Through the view screen, Park could see the alien ships surrounding the Dauntless, maintaining formation but no longer firing. "They think we're done," she said softly. "They think they've beaten us." The ship groaned around them as more systems failed. Life support was switching to emergency backup, and the artificial gravity fluctuated uncomfortably. "Captain," Dr. Lee's voice came through again, weaker now. "Something's happening with the quantum core, the alien energy weapon. It's causing some kind of reaction I've never seen before. The core is adapting." Park exchanged a glance with Lieutenant Kim. "Adapting? What do you mean?" "I don't fully understand it yet," Lee admitted, "but instead of shutting down, the quantum core is absorbing the energy and changing. I need to study this further." Before Park could respond, a final, massive pulse of energy washed over the ship. The remaining consoles died, and the emergency lighting failed. In the sudden darkness of the bridge, the only illumination came from the view screen, showing the Vex ships beginning to move away. "They're leaving," Kim whispered in the darkness. "They think we're dead in space." As consciousness began to fade from the lack of oxygen, Captain Park's last thought was clear and determined. The Vex had made a terrible mistake. They had tried to cripple the Dauntless, but something in Dr. Lee's words gave her hope. The quantum core was adapting, changing. The darkness claimed her then, but not before she saw something strange through the view screen. A faint blue glow beginning to emanate from deep within the ship's hull, pulsing like a heartbeat. Captain Hannah Park moved slowly through the twisted corridors of the Dauntless, the emergency lighting casting eerie blue shadows across her face. 3 days had passed since the attack. 3 days of counting the dead, treating the wounded, and trying to understand what had happened to their ship. The once proud vessel was a wreck. Corridors ended in sealed bulkheads where explosive decompression had claimed entire sections. Half the crew was dead. The other half fought to stay alive as life support systems gradually failed around them. She paused at a junction to catch her breath, the air thin and stale. The oxygen recyclers were operating at minimum capacity, giving them perhaps another day before the carbon dioxide levels became lethal. She pushed aside the thought and continued toward engineering. When the doors hissed open, Captain Park found a gathering of haggard survivors. Chief Engineer Dr. Suk Lee stood near the quantum core, the ship's primary power source, surrounded by the remaining engineering crew. Their faces were illuminated by an unnatural glow. "Report," Park said, her voice hoarse from the smoke she had inhaled during the attack. Dr. Lee turned, dark circles under her eyes evidence of her sleepless efforts. "Captain, you need to see this." Park approached the quantum core, expecting to find a dead or dying system. Instead, she saw something impossible. The core pulsed with life, but not the steady blue glow it had emitted since the ship's commissioning. Now it swirled with colors, blues, purples, even flashes of something that looked almost golden. "The quantum core should be completely dead," Dr. Lee said, gesturing to the pulsing heart of the ship. "But it's not. It's changing." Park moved closer, feeling a strange warmth emanating from the core. "Changing how?" "We're not sure," Dr. Lee admitted. "The Vex weapon was designed to overload our systems and leave us helpless in space. By all logic, the core should have shut down or exploded. Instead, she gestured to a screen showing energy readings that made no sense to Park. "Instead, it adapted," a new voice said. Park turned to see Ta Choi, the ship's eye specialist, his thin face illuminated by the screen of his portable terminal. He looked even worse than the others, his right arm wrapped in a makeshift sling. "What do you mean, adapted?" Park asked. Ta pointed to his terminal. "I've been interfacing with what remains of NOVA, or at least, what I thought remained." NOVA was the ship's artificial intelligence system, designed to manage thousands of functions throughout the massive vessel. During the attack, they had assumed it was destroyed along with most of the ship's primary systems. "NOVA is still operational?" Park asked, a flicker of hope rising in her chest. "Operational isn't the right word," Ta said, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. "NOVA's processing capability has increased 1,000-fold. And the ship, Captain, I think the ship is healing itself." Park stared at him. "That's impossible." "See for yourself," Dr. Lee said, leading her to another terminal. The screen showed microscopic images of the ship's hull. Park watched in disbelief as the molecular structure rearranged itself before her eyes, damaged components knitting back together like living tissue. "This started about 6 hours ago," Dr. Lee explained. "At first we thought it was some kind of sensor malfunction, but then we confirmed it with visual inspection." She pointed to a section of wall near them. Park moved closer and touched the metal. Instead of the smooth, cold surface she expected, it felt almost warm, with a subtle texture like nothing she had ever encountered on a spacecraft before. "What's happening to my ship?" she whispered. "The Vex weapon," Dr. Lee said. "It wasn't just an attack. It was transformative. The energy patterns it used somehow catalyzed a reaction in our quantum core. The core is now drawing energy from subspace in ways our scientists theorized but never achieved." "And NOVA?" Park asked, turning to Ta. The AI specialist shook his head in wonder. NOVA was integrated with all ship systems. When those systems began to change, NOVA changed with them. It's learning, adapting, becoming something beyond its original programming. As if in response to his words, the lights in engineering flickered and then brightened slightly. The terminal screens all shifted at once, displaying a simple message. "Adapting." "It can hear us," Ta said quietly. Over the next 4 days, the crew of the Dauntless witnessed the impossible. Life support systems came back online, but they worked differently now, more efficiently. The ship's hull, once breached in dozens of places, sealed itself. Most remarkably, the Dauntless began to feed. It started with small pieces of space debris. The crew watched in amazement as fragments of metal and rock were drawn to the hull, absorbed into it, and converted into energy and raw materials. On the seventh day after the attack, Captain Park stood in the observation lounge, watching as a small asteroid, rich in iron and nickel, slowly dissolved into the ship's hull. Beside her stood Dr. Lee and Ta Choi. "It's not just repairing itself," Dr. Lee said. "It's rebuilding, but to different specifications. The hull now contains alloys we've never seen before, stronger and more flexible than anything in our database." "And NOVA?" Park asked. Tay's face was a mixture of awe and concern. "NOVA has integrated with the quantum core completely now. It's become the ship's nervous system. It can feel damage, redirect energy, prioritize repairs. It's becoming alive, in a way." As if to demonstrate, the lights dimmed briefly around them. "Yes, we're talking about you," Ta said to the ceiling, a nervous smile on his face. The lights brightened again. "Can it understand us?" Park asked. "More and more each day," Ta confirmed. "It's learning at an exponential rate." Park turned back to the window, watching as new material formed along the hull, sleek and almost iridescent in the starlight. The Dauntless no longer looked entirely human in design. Its lines were becoming more organic, more efficient. "What about weapons systems?" she asked. Dr. Lee's expression turned grim. "That's where things get interesting. The weapon banks are rebuilding themselves, but not to original specifications. They're becoming something else entirely. Something more powerful. We think so, but we won't know until we test them." Park nodded slowly, her mind racing with the implications. The Vex had attacked them, thinking to leave them helpless and dying in space. Instead, they had triggered an evolution none of them understood yet. "Navigation and propulsion?" she asked. "Coming back online," Dr. Lee reported. "But like everything else, they're different now. Early tests suggest we might be capable of speeds well beyond our original design specifications." Park stared at the ever-changing hull of her ship, a decision forming in her mind. "Plot a course for the nearest human outpost. We need to warn Earth about the Vex threat." Tai and Dr. Lee exchanged glances. "What is it?" Park asked. "Communications came partially back online an hour ago," Ta said. "We picked up Vex transmissions. They're planning something big, Captain. An invasion force." Park's jaw tightened. "Then we don't have much time." As they turned to leave the observation deck, Park paused for one last look at her transformed ship. "They meant to cripple us," she said quietly, as new, unfamiliar alloys continued to form along the hull. "Instead, they've created something new." Behind her, the lights pulsed in what almost seemed like agreement. The Dauntless was no longer just a ship. It was becoming something more, something the Vex would soon learn to fear. 2 weeks had passed since the attack, and the Dauntless had changed beyond recognition. The once standard military vessel now possessed a sleek, almost organic appearance. Its hull shimmered with new alloys that seemed to drink in starlight rather than reflect it. Inside, the corridors had healed and reshaped themselves, with lighting that responded to the crew's presence like a living thing. Captain Hannah Park sat in the command chair on the newly reformed bridge. The traditional stations and consoles had been replaced by interfaces that seemed to meld with the operator's hands. The crew had adapted to these changes with remarkable resilience, though the losses they had suffered still weighed heavily on everyone. Engine efficiency at 227% of original specifications, reported Dr. Lee from her new engineering interface. "Whatever the Dauntless is becoming, it's far more powerful than anything in the Earth fleet." Park nodded, still struggling to fully comprehend what had happened to her ship. The Vex weapon had triggered something no human scientist had ever predicted, a complete molecular restructuring that continued even now. The ship was evolving, becoming something new with each passing hour. "Navigation is plotting the fastest route back to Earth space," Lieutenant Kim said from Tactical. "At our new maximum speed, we could be there in approximately 2 weeks." Before Park could respond, Communications Officer Jin Kang straightened suddenly at her station, her fingers dancing across the luminescent interface. "Captain, I'm picking up something," she announced, her voice tight with concentration. It's faint, but it's definitely a transmission on a Vex frequency. Park turned toward her. Can you clean it up? Working on it, Jin replied. No VA is helping to boost the signal. The mention of the ship's AI still sent a slight chill down Park's spine. No VA had become something far beyond its original programming. A true artificial intelligence that had integrated with every aspect of the ship. It communicated directly with the crew now, sometimes through text on screens, sometimes through subtle changes in lighting or temperature. Park was still learning how to interpret these signals. As if responding to her thoughts, the main view screen flickered to life, displaying a message. DECRBTION in Paraguarius. Jin worked at her station, her forehead creased with concentration. It's heavily encrypted, but Nino VA is breaking through their security protocols like they're barely there. That's new, Dr. Lee murmured. The screen flickered again, this time showing a progress bar that filled rapidly. Then, suddenly, the bridge speakers crackled to life. Captain, I've decrypted their communications, Jin announced, her voice tight with urgency. No VA has translated the alien language. The bridge crew fell silent as a harsh, mechanical voice filled the room. The test weapon performed as expected on the human vessel. The voice stated coldly. Phase 1 is complete. Analysis confirms the humans possess no technology capable of countering our systems. Begin preparations for the full-scale invasion. These humans will fall as easily as the Marothi and the Thelans before them. The recording continued, detailing invasion plans, fleet movements, and target priorities. Earth's major population centers were at the top of the list. When the transmission finally ended, the bridge remained silent for several long moments. Captain Park's hands had tightened into fists, her knuckles white against her uniform. They'd done this before, she said finally, her voice barely more than a whisper. They're systematically wiping out other species. Lieutenant Kim nodded grimly. The Marothi and Thelans. I've never heard of these species. Because they don't exist anymore, Dr. Lee said, her face pale. The Vex destroyed them completely. Park rose from her chair, moving to the center of the bridge. How many ships in the invasion fleet, based on that transmission? Jin checked her console. They referenced a standard pacification force, approximately 200 warships, from what I can gather. 200. Park repeated the number, letting it sink in. Earth's entire defense fleet numbered less than 50 vessels, none of which had faced anything like the Vex before. We need to warn Earth, Lieutenant Kim said, stating what everyone was thinking. They need to prepare, evacuate civilian populations, call in ships from the outer colonies. Jin shook her head. Long-range communications are still down. No VA has prioritized other systems for repair. We'd have to deliver the message in person. Park studied the star map now displayed on the main view screen. The shortest route back to Earth would take them through the heart of what appeared to be Vex-controlled space, based on the transmission data. How long would it take to restore long-range communications? She asked Dr. Lee. The engineer consulted with her terminal, which now seemed to respond to her thoughts as much as her touch. At least 6 days, maybe more. No VA is focusing on propulsion and defensive systems first. Park nodded, understanding the AI's priorities. And how long until the invasion fleet launches, based on the transmission? 4 days, Jin answered quietly. A heavy silence fell over the bridge again. Even if they headed straight for Earth at their maximum speed, they would arrive well after the invasion began. Millions would die before they could deliver their warning. What about alternate routes? Park asked, turning to navigation. Ensign Yoon, who had taken over navigation after the previous officer's death in the attack, studied his display. We could go around Vex space, but it would add at least 5 days to our journey. Too long, Park said. The lighting on the bridge dimmed slightly, then brightened again. No VA's way of seeking attention. The main screen changed to display a new route through Vex territory, with several points highlighted along the way. What is this? Park asked. Tai Choi, who had joined them on the bridge to monitor NOVA's integration, studied the display. "I think NOVA is suggesting an alternate strategy. These highlighted areas, they appear to be VEX communication relay stations based on the transmission data. If we could disable or access one of these relays," Jin said, understanding dawning on her face, "we might be able to send a warning to Earth through the VEX's own network." Park studied the proposed route. It would take them deep into enemy territory, but it offered the possibility of warning Earth before the invasion began. Can the Dauntless handle a confrontation with VEX forces in its current state? She asked Dr. Lee. The engineer exchanged a glance with Ta, both of them looking uncertain. "The ship has developed defensive capabilities we don't fully understand yet. It's possible we could defend ourselves, but—" She trailed off. "But we don't know for sure," Park finished for her. She turned to face the view screen, where the route through VEX territory glowed enticingly. "No VA, what are our chances of success if we take this route?" The screen flickered, and a simple message appeared. "Uncertain. In sufficient data, but I'm POVANG. UIT passing error." Park allowed herself a small smile. The ship, or NOVA, or perhaps the two were becoming one and the same, was being honest. They were venturing into the unknown, but getting stronger all the time. She turned to face her crew, seeing the determination in their tired eyes. Half their friends and colleagues were dead. Those who remained had witnessed their ship transform into something beyond human understanding. Yet they stood ready, waiting for her decision. Captain Park nodded grimly. "Then that's what we'll do. Through VEX territory if necessary." She pointed to the first relay station on the map. "Set a course for this location, maximum speed. We'll warn Earth about what's coming. And these VEX will learn they picked the wrong species to mess with." As the crew moved to carry out her orders, the lights throughout the bridge pulsed in a pattern that almost resembled approval. The Dauntless, once crippled and left for dead, accelerated to speeds no human vessel had ever achieved, heading straight into the heart of enemy territory. The Dauntless slipped through the darkness of deep space, moving with a grace that defied its size. After 3 weeks of continuous evolution, the ship bore little resemblance to the human warship it had once been. Its hull no longer maintained the rigid geometric lines of human engineering, but flowed in curves and arcs that seemed almost alive. The metal itself had transformed into something new, an iridescent material that shifted colors as it moved, like oil on water. Captain Hannah Park stood on the bridge, watching the stars streak by through the view screen. The bridge, like the rest of the ship, had changed. The traditional stations remained, but they had merged with the structure of the ship itself, interfaces growing organically from walls and floors. The crew operated them with gestures that seemed more like a dance than work. "We're approaching the VEX patrol route," Lieutenant Kim announced from Tactical, his station now wrapped partially around him, screens floating in the air rather than fixed in place. Park nodded. "Slow to half speed. Let's see what we're dealing with." The Dauntless responded instantly, its new propulsion system adjusting with a smoothness no human engineer had ever achieved. 3 weeks ago, such precision would have required multiple crew members working in perfect coordination. Now, the ship anticipated commands almost before they were given. "Sensors detecting 3 VEX vessels ahead," Kim reported. "Standard patrol configuration. They haven't spotted us yet." Park considered their options. The mission to warn Earth about the coming invasion was their priority, but the opportunity to test the Dauntless's new capabilities against a small VEX force was tempting. "Take us in closer," she ordered, "but maintain stealth protocols." As the Dauntless moved forward, Dr. Lee entered the bridge accompanied by 2 distinctly non-human figures. The first was tall and slender, covered in iridescent feathers that shifted from blue to green with each movement. Its eyes were large and golden, set in a face with a sharp, beak-like nose. The second figure was shorter, with skin that resembled polished crystal, refracting light in rainbow patterns. Its 4 arms moved with fluid grace, and its face was a smooth surface with geometric patterns where eyes and mouth would be on a human. The crew had grown accustomed to the presence of these aliens over the past week, but their appearance on the bridge still drew glances of curiosity and wonder. "Captain," Dr. Lee said, "Krell and Ladon would like to observe this encounter. Their knowledge of Vex tactics has been invaluable so far." Park nodded to the aliens. "Of course. Your input is welcome." The avian Krell inclined its head in a gesture of respect. "We are honored, Captain Park. My people fought the Vex for 3 orbital cycles before they destroy our homeworld. We have much experience with their battle formations." The crystalline, Latin surface rippled in what Park had learned was their equivalent of speech. The Vex believe themselves superior to all other life forms. Their arrogance is their weakness. Before Park could respond, Kim called out from Tactical. "They've spotted us, Captain. Vex vessels changing course to intercept." "Raise shields," asked Ensign Yoon from Operations. Park exchanged a glance with Dr. Lee, who shook her head slightly. "No," Park said. "Let's see what our new hull can handle." The main view screen shifted to show the 3 Vex vessels approaching rapidly. They were smaller than the Dauntless, but moved with predatory intent, their weapon systems visibly charging. "They're preparing to fire," Kim reported, his voice remarkably calm given the circumstances. Krell stepped forward, feathers bristling. "Standard Vex tactic. First volley will be disabling shots, targeting propulsion systems." "Let them come," Park said, settling into her command chair. "All stations, prepare to monitor hull response, but take no defensive action." The bridge crew exchanged nervous glances, but followed orders. They had seen enough of the Dauntless's transformation to trust that their captain wasn't leading them into suicide. "They're firing," Kim announced as brilliant beams of energy lanced from the lead Vex ship. The energy weapons struck the Dauntless directly, but instead of the expected impact and damage, something remarkable happened. The iridescent hull seemed to ripple like water where the beams hit, and then the energy simply disappeared, absorbed completely into the ship's structure. "They're firing again," Lieutenant Kim reported calmly as another Vex patrol ship unleashed its weapons. Captain Park didn't even flinch. "Let them." The energy beams struck the Dauntless and simply disappeared into its hull. The ship hummed with absorbed power, and the lighting throughout the bridge brightened perceptibly. "Fascinating," Dr. Lee murmured, studying the readouts on her console. "The ship is converting their weapon energy directly into power for our systems. Efficiency is nearly 90%. The Vex ships fired again, this time coordinating their attack to hit the same section of hull simultaneously. The result was the same. The Dauntless absorbed the energy with no sign of damage. "They're changing tactics," Krell observed, watching the Vex ships reposition. "They will attempt to use cutting beams next, designed to slice through hull material." As predicted, the Vex vessels fired again, this time with narrowly focused beams of incredible intensity. When they struck the Dauntless, the hull not only absorbed the energy, but seemed to thicken and strengthen at the point of impact. "It's learning," Dr. Lee said with wonder in her voice. "The ship is analyzing each attack and adapting its structure in response." The main view screen flickered briefly, and a message appeared. "Adaptation complete. Offensive capabilities on in a line." "NOVA?" Park asked, addressing the ship's AI directly. In response, the view screen changed to show a schematic of the Dauntless, highlighting several areas where the hull had formed what appeared to be weapon emplacements. "The ship has developed its own weapons," Dr. Lee explained, studying her readouts. "Using the energy absorbed from the Vex attacks, it's created systems that can redirect that energy outward." Park considered this development. "Can we control these weapons?" The lights pulsed once, and tactical controls appeared on Lieutenant Kim's station. I think so," he said, exploring the new interface. "The targeting systems are integrated with our standard protocols, but the delivery method is completely new." The Vex ships, perhaps realizing their attacks were ineffective, began to move away, preparing to jump to faster-than-light speeds. "Should we let them go?" Kim asked. Park looked to Krell and Ladin. "What would you advise?" "The Vex do not offer mercy," Krell said simply. "They will return with greater numbers." Ladin's crystalline surface rippled. "If they escape, they will report the Dauntless's capabilities to their command. Your advantage of surprise will be lost." Park nodded and turned to Kim. "Target their engines only. Let's see what our new weapons can do." Kim worked the controls, and the Dauntless responded immediately. From points along its hull, beams of energy lanced out, not the standard red or blue of human weapons, but a strange, shifting iridescence that matched the hull itself. The beams struck the Vex ships with surgical precision, disabling their engines without destroying the vessels completely. The alien ships drifted helplessly in space. "Remarkable accuracy," Kim said, checking his readouts. "These weapons are more precise than anything I've ever seen." Park stood from her command chair. "Bring us alongside the lead vessel. I want to know what's on their computer systems." As the Dauntless moved into position, Dr. Lee approached the captain. "There's something else you should know," she said quietly. "Something I've been observing over the past few days." Park raised an eyebrow in question. "The ship isn't just adapting," Dr. Lee explained during a briefing. "It's anticipating. No VA has merged with the quantum core. The ship is becoming sentient." As if to emphasize her point, the lights pulsed in agreement. "You mean NOVA is controlling the ship?" Park asked. "No," Lee shook her head. "I mean the ship and NOVA are becoming one entity. The distinction between AI and vessel is blurring. It's developing consciousness, awareness of itself, as a unified being." Park looked around the bridge, suddenly seeing the ship not as a vessel, but as a living entity carrying them through space. "Can it understand us? Truly understand?" In response, words formed on the main view screen. "I-U England D-Orst and I-Pro-T-E-C-T. I-Evolve." "Well," Park said after a moment of silence, "I suppose that answers that question." With the disabled Vex ships floating helplessly nearby, the crew of the Dauntless faced a new reality. Their ship wasn't just a tool anymore. It was becoming a companion, an ally with a mind of its own. And as they prepared to extract data from the Vex computers, they knew that whatever they learned, the Dauntless would continue to evolve, becoming something the galaxy had never seen before. The war to save humanity had only just begun, but for the first time since the ambush, Captain Park felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. The Vex staging area came into view on the Dauntless's sensors. An enormous fleet gathered near a dying star. Captain Hannah Park stood on the bridge, her face illuminated by the glow of tactical displays. After 5 weeks of evolution, the ship had become something beyond human understanding. Its hull no longer resembled metal, but something alive, shifting, adapting, thinking. 53 Vex warships detected. Lieutenant Kim reported from Tactical. "They're in invasion formation. Earth is their target." Park nodded grimly. The journey through Vex territory had been challenging but illuminating. With each encounter, the Dauntless had grown stronger, absorbing new technologies and adapting its structure. The ship that had once been crippled was now the most powerful vessel humans had ever created, though created no longer seemed the right word. "Are they aware of our presence?" Park asked. "Not yet," Kim replied. "Our stealth systems are still functioning. They can't detect us at this range." Dr. Lee approached the captain's chair, her expression serious. "The ship is ready, Captain. All systems are operating beyond anything we could have imagined." Beside her stood their alien allies, Krell, the avian survivor whose homeworld had been destroyed by the Vex, and Ladin, whose crystalline people had been reduced to a handful of refugees. Both had contributed invaluable knowledge about Vex tactics and weaknesses. "Your plan is bold," Krell said, his feathers shifting from blue to gold with emotion. No single ship has ever challenged a Vex invasion fleet. The Dauntless is no ordinary ship, Park replied, running her hand along the living surface of her command chair. The material seemed to warm slightly at her touch, almost like skin responding to contact. On the main view screen, the massive Vex command ship became visible, nearly 3 times the size of the Dauntless, bristling with weapons. It was surrounded by smaller vessels, all preparing for their jump to Earth. We could still try to slip past them, Ensign Yoon suggested from navigation. Warn Earth, bring back reinforcements. Park shook her head. Earth has no weapons that could stop this fleet, and we'd never evacuate enough people in time. She stood, facing her crew. We end this here. The bridge fell silent as the crew absorbed her words. They were proposing to attack an entire invasion fleet with a single ship. Against any normal vessel, the odds would be impossible. But the Dauntless was anything but normal now. Take us in, Park ordered. Drop stealth systems when we're in range to communicate. The ship accelerated smoothly, its new propulsion systems operating in perfect silence. As they approached the Vex fleet, Park could feel a subtle vibration through the deck, not the mechanical rumble of engines, but something almost like anticipation. We're in range, Kim announced. Park straightened her uniform jacket and nodded. Open a channel to the Vex command ship. The view screen shifted to show a communications interface. Words appeared. Channel open. All VX vessels receiving. Park took a deep breath and spoke clearly. This is Captain Hannah Park of the UES Dauntless. You attacked us, thinking to cripple what you could not understand. You failed. Withdraw your invasion fleet or face the consequences. For a moment, there was no response. Then the view screen changed to show the Vex commander, a tall, humanoid figure with gleaming metallic skin and eyes that glowed with an unnatural light. Captain Park, the Vex commander said, its voice surprisingly melodious despite its mechanical nature. Your survival is unexpected, but ultimately irrelevant. One damaged vessel cannot stop a fleet. Stand down and your crew will be studied rather than exterminated. Park smiled thinly. You still don't understand what you created when you attacked us. This is your final warning. The Vex commander made a gesture that might have been dismissal. Your species will join the others we have harvested, beginning with your vessel. The transmission cut off abruptly. They're charging weapons, Kim reported, his voice steady despite the situation. All ships targeting us. Park returned to her command chair. Shields. Not necessary, Dr. Lee said confidently. The hull will absorb their energy. And if they try physical projectiles. The lights on the bridge pulsed once, and words appeared on a nearby screen. IYLPROTCT. Park nodded. Very well, NOVA. Show them what you can do. The first wave of Vex attacks came seconds later, dozens of energy beams striking the Dauntless simultaneously. As before, the ship's hull simply absorbed the energy, rippling like water where the beams hit. But this time, something new happened. The hull began to glow, storing the massive influx of power. They're launching missiles, Kim warned. Before anyone could respond, the hull of the Dauntless shifted. Portions extended outward, forming a complex geometric pattern that surrounded the ship like a lattice. When the Vex missiles reached this field, they simply stopped, then slowly dissolved, their components being absorbed into the Dauntless's structure. Incredible, Dr. Lee whispered, watching her readouts. The ship is breaking down the missiles at the molecular level and repurposing their materials. The Vex fleet fired again, this time with their most powerful weapons. The energy struck the Dauntless and was absorbed so completely that the ship now glowed like a small sun. Energy storage at maximum capacity, Kim reported. The ship is ready to respond. Park leaned forward in her chair. Target their weapon systems only. Let's show them what happens when they underestimate humanity. What followed wasn't a battle so much as a demonstration. The Dauntless moved like a living thing, weaving between the larger Vex vessels with impossible agility. From points all along its hull, it released the stored energy in precisely controlled pulses. Each pulse struck a Vex ship's weapons arrays with surgical precision, disabling rather than destroying. "They're trying to surround us," Kim warned as the Vex ships adjusted their formation. In response, the Dauntless accelerated suddenly, reaching speeds that pressed the crew back into their seats despite the inertial dampeners. It shot through the Vex formation, releasing pulses of energy as it went. One by one, the Vex ships fell silent, their weapons systems overloaded by the Dauntless's attacks. Some began to retreat, jumping away to safety. "The command ship is attempting to flee," Kim reported. "Not yet," Park said firmly. "Bring us alongside them. I want to speak to their commander again." The Dauntless responded instantly, matching speed with the massive Vex vessel. Even with most of its weapons disabled, the command ship dwarfed the Dauntless, its hull still bristling with secondary armaments. "Channel open," Kim announced. Park stood once more. "Vex Commander, your fleet is disabled. Your invasion has failed. Retreat from human space and do not return." The Vex Commander appeared on screen again, its metallic features now showing what might have been concern. "What are you?" it demanded. "No human vessel possesses such capabilities." "We are the future," Park replied simply. "A future you created when you attacked us. Remember that when you consider returning to human space." To emphasize her point, the Dauntless released a final pulse of energy, this one striking the Vex command ship's engines, leaving it drifting helplessly. "Send a message to your leaders," Park continued. "Humanity is not to be underestimated. We adapt, we evolve, and we protect our own." She cut the transmission with a gesture and turned to her crew. "Set course for Earth. Maximum speed. Let's go home." As the Dauntless turned away from the disabled Vex fleet, a cheer went up from the bridge crew. They had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious. More importantly, they had stopped an invasion that would have cost millions of lives. Captain Park moved to the front of the bridge, gazing at the view screen as it showed their course home. Earth's sun was just visible, a distant point of light that represented everything they had fought to protect. "They tried to cripple our warship," she said quietly. "Instead, they created something unstoppable." Behind her, the transformed ship pulsed with newfound power, ready to defend humanity against whatever might come next. The lights dimmed and brightened in a pattern that the crew had come to recognize as satisfaction. As they accelerated toward home, leaving the broken Vex fleet behind, Park realized that their journey was really just beginning. The Dauntless had become something new, not just a ship, but a new form of life, and humanity's place in the galaxy had changed forever. The Vex had sought to conquer Earth, believing humans to be weak and unprepared. Instead, they had created their own worst nightmare, a ship that couldn't be destroyed, that learned from every attack, that grew stronger with each challenge. As stars streaked past on the view screen, Park smiled. "Let them come again," she thought. "We'll be ready." The Dauntless hummed in agreement, its consciousness now intertwined with the crew it had chosen to protect. Together, they raced toward home, carrying with them a message for all who would threaten humanity in the future. "Underestimate us at your peril."